So you should be reading in our book, the next chapter, starting on page 254, and you should be reading through page 256. So it's chapter 6, Political Geography. And there's a couple of terms we need to start off the chapter with, making sure that you use them correctly. So when you refer to a country, that's an identifiable land area. The term nation means a population with one culture. So you would not call the United States a nation. In fact, the United States is made up of many nationalities, so we would call it a multi-nation state. The term state does not mean in geography necessarily the same thing as like the state of Florida. Although because of the structure of our country as a federalist democratic republic, you could say that Florida is technically a state as well. But a state just means that it's a population under a single government. So the United States is a sovereign state. France is a sovereign state. Russia is a state. So when we talk about something being a state, we just mean that it's a sovereign country, that it's under its own government, and that it's everybody who belongs to that sovereign country belongs in that state. The term nation state refers to a single culture under a single government, and true nation states are very rare. We have what we would call a multinational state, so many nationalities. So again, a state is an area that's organized into a political unit, and it's ruled by an established government that has control over its internal and foreign affairs. And so it occupies a defined territory and has a permanent population. Sovereignty means that it's independent of control from other states. And again, the United States is a federal system of government, so it's made up of many independent states within that larger, within the larger context of it being a state recognized by the United Nations. So nationality is an identity with a group of people who share a legal attachment and a personal allegiance to a particular country. So nationality is very similar to ethnicity. Both nationalities and ethnicities are going to share cultural values, and these values come from things like religion, language, and material culture. But nationality is different from ethnicity in its terms of legal standing. So nationality is defined through shared experiences from voting, obtaining a passport, and performing civic duties. Within the United States, we have some nationalities. And how do you distinguish between nationality, race, and ethnicity in the U.S.? So nationality would identify a citizen of the United States. Ethnicity would identify a group with a distinct ancestry and cultural traditions, and race would distinguish basically just the like when you talk about like race, you're talking about like are you black or white? And of these three, race is really the most subject to people's personal conceptions. Your ethnicity usually has to do with like your personal heritage, where you're from and your cultural traditions. Race is really something that we've decided as a group of people is important. So it is the least well defined group of these. So within the U.S., we have many nationalities. So you could say that our nationality is United States as a citizen of the United States or American. But within the United States, we also have other nationalities. And so another nationality within the U.S. would be any of the groups of Native Americans. I feel like Cherokee is always like the one that students recognize. So the Cherokee Nation within the United States. The Seminole Nation, because they have their own IDs on reservations. They have their own system of police. They are sovereign within their reservations. So we are a multi-nation state because we have many different nationalities within the borders of our country. There are some challenges about defining our states. So there's disagreement about the number of actual sovereign states as a result of historical disputes. So if more than one place has claim to a territory, we still kind of are unclear about it. So some of the most popular, most famous ones is Most people consider China and Taiwan separate states. However, China recognizes Taiwan as part of China and refuses to make that distinction. Another one is Western Sahara. Most African countries consider Western Sahara a sovereign state, its own nation. But Morocco claimed the territory and built a wall around it to keep the rebels out. So here's part of the wall around. Well, this isn't all of it here, but this is the wall that's being built around Western Sahara. We also have problems in polar regions. So who claims the South Pole? Who claims the North Pole? It's like the United States and Russia don't recognize any claims made to Antarctica. And in fact, in 1982, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea permitted countries to submit claims inside the Arctic Circle by 2009. So that's a disputed area. Several states are claiming portion of the South Pole region, including Argentina, Australia, Chile, France, New Zealand, Norway, and the UK. And some of these claims are overlapping and conflicting. So we'll talk a little bit more about the challenges in claiming a territory later. When we develop a state, the development of the state, the idea of a state tracks back to the Fertile Crescent. And the first states were known as city-states, and these were sovereign states that are comprised of towns and their surrounding countrysides. So this would have been like in ancient Greece when they had like Troy or Athens. So they didn't recognize like one large country or one large state like Greece. They would have been recognized by their city-states. And city-states grew into medieval states, and these medieval states had military dominance of city-states. And this eventually led to the formation of empires like the Roman Empire. When the Roman Empire collapsed in the 5th century, its land was parceled up and then controlled by various monarchies. And then you would have the concept of a feudal lord, and that's when we really would have gotten into medieval states. And that's when you began to have the idea of a large country with like many smaller parts. So you would have had a king of France, and within France you would have had, like the Duke of Anjou ruling that feudal territory. A nation state is a territory or a sovereign state that corresponds to that occupied by a particular ethnicity. And the idea that ethnicities have the right to govern themselves is known as self-determination. So after World War I, lots of countries met at the Versailles Peace Conference to redraw the map of Europe. And they used language to create new European states and to adjust the boundaries. And so many of the nation states that were created by the Versailles Conference lasted through most of the 20th century with not much adjustment. So we would have carved up from these empires and these medieval states into really a map that's fairly recognizable as modern day Europe. Multi-nation states and multinational states. A state that contains more than one ethnicity is a multi-ethnic state. So the United States is a multi-ethnic state, and we do usually form a single nationality. Most people who live in the United States recognize themselves as American in some way, shape, or form, although not everyone. And technically the U.S. is also a multinational state, like we've talked about. Russia is also a multinational state. So multinational state is a country that contains more than one ethnicity with traditions of self-determination, like in Russia. And then a nation state in Europe, Denmark is an example. 90% of the people who live in Denmark are ethnic Danes. Nearly all of Danish people speak Danish, and almost all the world's Danish speakers live in Denmark. And 90% is about as close as you get. There's no nation really that just has people who live there as under one nationality. Slovenia, 83% of the population are ethnic Slovenes, and almost all the Slovenes live in Slovenia. Other nation states would be maybe Japan is pretty close. I wouldn't worry too much about this, but here you've got independent nation states outside after the USSR broke up. And I think that's about it for now. We'll go over some more in class.